Over 3,000 years ago, in the dense rainforests of southern Mexico, there was a civilization whose traces remain a mystery to this day. The Olmecs, often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind monumental works of art, complex calendar systems, and a rich symbolism deeply rooted in the spiritual and social structures of their time. But who were these people really? What motivated them to transport basalt blocks weighing tons and transform them into masterfully crafted colossal heads? How did they manage to develop such a precise timekeeping system as the long count calendar? And why did they fall into oblivion over the centuries? Today, we'll show you the remarkable milestones the Olmecs achieved and why they are still considered one of the most mysterious peoples the world has ever seen. When the first traces of a previously unknown civilization are uncovered, the archaeological uproar is boundless. Well, at least that's what you'd think. But in reality, what came to light in the Mexican state of Veracruz in 1862 initially received little attention. At that time, simple workers had stumbled upon an oversized stone head that stood almost 3 meters tall, had detailed facial features, and wore a kind of helmet. But since the archaeological expertise in the region was, to put it mildly, limited, no one was initially interested in this enormous historical artifact. This only changed in the 1930s when American archaeologists Matthew and Marion Sterling took the old reports of the find as an opportunity to search for the lost traces of the past in Tres Zapotes themselves. Traveling in Mexico in 1938 on behalf of the Smithsonian Institution, the Sterlings made a sensational discovery the following year when they unearthed another colossal stone head that was undoubtedly man-made, but could not be attributed to any known culture. The researchers realized that they had just stumbled upon the first relics of a previously unknown, highly developed civilization, and thus laid the foundation for a series of further remarkable discoveries that would reveal just how advanced this enigmatic people really was. In the years and decades that followed, many more artifacts of this advanced civilization were recovered in the regions of San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes, including monumental altars, masks, jade jewelry, steels with inscriptions, and extensive settlement structures. Gradually, a picture emerged of a powerful, centrally organized civilization that had existed centuries before the Maya, and the Olmecs had finally arrived in the consciousness of modern historians. What is known about the history of the Olmecs? In parallel with the archaeological finds, researchers were also able to reconstruct the former territories of the Olmecs. We know that they lived in the southeast of present-day Mexico, particularly in the flat tropical lowlands of the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. However, their cultural sphere of influence extended much further, as artifacts with Olmec stylistic features have been discovered hundreds of kilometers away. From a purely chronological perspective, the Olmec era is dated to between approximately 1500 and 400 BC. During these more than 1,000 years, 3 large urban centers developed, of which San Lorenzo is the oldest known large settlement in Mesoamerica. The roots of this site date back to 1200 BC, but around 300 years later, La Venta became an important religious and political center for the Olmecs. The latest urban center was Tres Zapotes, which was founded around 1000 BC and existed until around 100 AD. And while all these cities bear witness to the impressive technical, organizational, and artistic skills of their builders, we also have a fairly accurate idea of how Olmec society was structured. And this despite the fact that the Olmecs left no written records in the conventional sense. But their works of art and monuments speak volumes. After all, recurring symbols such as the were-jaguar, a hybrid creature part human and part big cat, provide just as deep an insight into the myths and rituals of the time as the complex reliefs on altars and steels. These depictions show a world in which the spiritual and secular were inextricably linked. More specifically, the Olmec deities went hand in hand with natural forces such as rain, fertility, and the sun. And the shamans, or priest kings at the top of the clearly hierarchical society, played a central role in this. They were considered the link between the human world and the realm of the gods. They were often depicted in animal form or wearing animal masks, which suggests transformation rituals or trance states. But twins, corn gods, and snakes also had a higher meaning in the Olmec symbolism. And indeed, these motifs would later reappear in the myths of the Maya and Aztecs. Furthermore, the elite class of priests and rulers had enormous earthen platforms built, on which temples, palaces, and ceremonial complexes were enthroned. The general population, on the other hand, consisted of farmers, craftsmen, and workers who not only ensured the agricultural supply, but were also responsible for the construction of these monumental buildings. The most famous legacies of the Olmecs are also the most mysterious, and researchers are still asking themselves the following question. What are the colossal stone heads supposed to represent? Since the discoveries made by the workers and the Sterlings, the list of colossal heads has grown to include one or two more entries. We now know of 17 of these impressive historical artifacts. In terms of impressive dimensions, the massive skulls paint a uniform picture. Some of them are up to 3.4 meters high and weigh over 20 tons. But at the same time, the sculptures have always been given distinctive individual faces and helmets or headgear. But what are these historical artifacts actually trying to tell us? Do they represent purely mythological beings, or were they based on real models? Well, that is precisely the question on which experts cannot really agree. While some researchers assume that we are actually looking at real rulers or warriors, others interpret the stone heads as ancestral figures or divinely revered beings. In any case, the individuality of the facial features suggests that they are portraits made in honor of important personalities. But that is not all. Many observers are skeptical because of the appearance of the colossal heads. In reality, their characteristic features are not supposed to resemble the classic indigenous people of Central America at all, but rather the indigenous populations of Polynesia or Africa. In view of this, one might quickly come to the conclusion that the Olmecs themselves originated from these regions, for how could they have depicted something that they had never seen before? At this point, however, the question arises as to whether there were ever such a thing as the classical indigenous people of Central America. In this regard, we should not forget that the genetic history of indigenous peoples is extremely complex and has been influenced by a variety of different factors. But despite all the alternative theories about their origins, it is undisputed that the creation of the colossal heads was nothing less than an ancient masterpiece. And that does not only refer to the actual craftsmanship of the sculptures. In fact, they were made of basalt that was quarried up to 150 kilometers away. The fact that the Olmecs managed to transport these loads, which weighed tons, over such enormous distances is all the more impressive when we consider that they did not use wheeled vehicles or pack animals. So, how did they do it? Unfortunately, we cannot answer this question with any certainty, but the most likely theory is that the Olmecs first transported the basalt across rivers on rafts and then brought it to its intended location using sledges and rollers. Once there, the stone heads did not stand alone, but were arranged together with platforms and altars as part of a cultic political display of power. The mysterious demise of the Olmecs. Far away from their stone legacy, the Olmecs are also considered to be the first inhabitants of America to develop a structured writing system. As mentioned above, written records of the advanced civilization are rare, which makes the discovery of the so-called colossal stone all the more significant. Found in a gravel pit in the late 1990s, the stone block is adorned with a total of 62 horizontally arranged characters belonging to a previously unknown script. This may be a pictographic, phonetic writing system that was later adopted and perfected by the Maya, and it could also be that the Olmecs also did pioneering work in the field of calendars. Although no complete Olmec calendar has been found to date, numerous archaeological discoveries suggest that they laid the foundations for the calendar systems of subsequent Mesoamerican cultures. The most important evidence of the use of a complex calendar is provided by stele C, also discovered by Matthew and Marion Sterling in 1939. More specifically, the artifacts show a so-called long count calendar date. We are therefore dealing with a system that does not only focus on short periods of time, such as solar years or months, but counts the days since a mythological date of creation. Stele C contains the long count date 7/16/6/16/18, which corresponds to September 3rd, 32 BC in our calendar. However, given all the cultural and architectural achievements of the Olmecs, a completely different question naturally arises. Why did this advanced people, who apparently had such a great influence on subsequent cultures, actually disappear? How did it come about that it took until 1862 before we even learned of the existence of this remarkable civilization? Unfortunately, the demise of the Olmecs has not yet been fully clarified, as there are simply no written records that would provide us with a clear, final act. What we do know comes from the archaeological finds, environmental analyses, and comparisons with other Mesoamerican peoples. And it seems that the Olmecs did not disappear suddenly, but underwent a gradual decline that manifested itself in different ways in different places over several phases. And researchers generally suspect that environmental problems played a central role in this. According to this theory, river shifts could have cut off entire cities such as San Lorenzo from their vital waterways. Intensive agriculture could in turn have led to consequences such as soil erosion, swamping, and a collapse of the agricultural economy. But climate changes such as longer periods of drought or flooding are also being discussed in this context. However, there are also indications of violent upheavals. Monuments were destroyed or buried in San Lorenzo, suggesting uprisings or a deliberate rejection of the old symbols of power. It is therefore possible that internal revolts or power struggles between rival groups took place, but the influence of neighboring cultures could not be ignored here either. The groups from the highlands of Oaxaca, such as the Zapotecs, and later the Teotihuacanos and Maya, spread further and further and may have exerted political pressure on the Olmecs or taken over their trade routes. However, many researchers argue that there was no complete collapse of the Olmecs at all, but rather a transformation of Olmec culture. As we know, their influences lived on in other cultures, so it is possible that the Olmec elite continued to exist in a different form or merged with new groups. And now you can combine your click with a subscription. Simply press the thumb icon and click subscribe to never miss another video from us. See you soon!